Hi guys! Today I want to show you how to dissect a notebook to put inside your Filofax. I use A5 size Filofaxes, so I'm using an A5 size notebook. To choose a notebook for a personal size or pocket size or mini size Filofax, it could be tricky because most notebooks aren't those sizes, because Filofax have chosen quite a unique proportion of paper size for those sized binders, but the A5 size Filofax fits A5 size paper perfectly, so it's quite easy to find notebooks for that. If you use a smaller Filofax, then it might require trimming, but that's all part of the fun of customizing a Filofax. So what you need for this operation is a craft mat, the notebook, a metal ruler that's quite thin, a craft knife or similar knife, and a stitch unpicker that you use for sewing. So, the first thing you need to do is look at the binding of your notebook. This is one of those notebooks that is made up from little booklets, where the manufacturer has taken 4 or so sheets of paper and have made them into little booklets so that you can see in the middle of each booklet a row of stitching, just trying to find one, that holds those 4 sheets together. It's quite difficult to see in some notebooks that have been well glued, but normally what you can see is a line of stitching that goes up the middle. I don't know if you can see it here, but there's stitching that goes up the middle of the notebook, and that's what we want to cut. So the first thing that we need to do is find the middle of one of those booklets. Now these booklets are attached to the cover using glue, and that's what holds it together. So we need to cut through them, and once you've cut through a booklet, it's quite easy to take the pages out as long as you unstick the glue. Now you could have some gluey residue left on the edges of the pages, so they might require an extra trim, but that's what we'll do afterwards. So the first thing you need to do, remembering your craft knife is very sharp and it's very dangerous and keep pets and children away, is to break the spine of your notebook, and that's just by bending it back, and this makes it much easier to manipulate. Try not to damage the notebook any more than you have to, but this just means that you get the stitches close to the surface so that you can cut them, and that's what the stitch unpicker is for. Now hopefully I'll be able to do it, but this is quite stiff, so I don't know if I will be able to. But the trick is to pull up the stitch with the stitch unpicker and to push the stitch unpicker under it, trying to slice it with the sharp edge. It's quite difficult because you're trying not to actually scratch the paper as you go. It's actually quite difficult, and I am starting to scratch the paper, so I might continue this with the craft knife because it's not working with the stitch unpicker. It's more difficult with the craft knife not to actually scratch the paper, but it is easier to pick up the pages. I can see that the stitching is loosening, and it's quite tricky. You don't actually have to do this if you can cut through the paper well with the stitches being there. So I'm going to leave that stage until a minute. I'm just going to put my stitch unpicker away because it is very sharp, and I'm going to take the ruler and then put it as close to one side of the centre as possible, and just use this as leverage to cut through this little booklet of the notebook. And the reason I'm using a ruler is because I've done this before. Oops, I've just cut through some pages. I've done this before in the past and you do get a wobbly hand. So I'm trying to steady my hand, even though, as I've just shown, it's not foolproof because I am actually cutting through pages. It's quite tricky to keep your hand steady. And you do have to have concentration, which is quite difficult when you're on trying to film. You could do it without the ruler if you want, because what happens with the ruler is that it pushes your craft knife so that some of the pages are going to be smaller. I'm going to do it without the craft knife now. Yeah, I've sliced through that page, which is annoying. Let's see. There you go. I've cut through a page, but it's got the page out, and so if you just ignore that mistake I've made, that's what you'll end up with. It is a bit wobbly down the side, but it means that you've got the page out of the pretty notebook and you are able to punch it and put it in your Filofax. Now let's see if I can do it with some more to show you, and then I will punch them. You may hear my dog squeaking his squeaky toy. Sorry about that. I live in a very noisy house. Yeah, actually I'm finding it's easier without the ruler. You just need a very steady hand and concentration. I can hear it cutting through the glue. And this is a very, very sharp craft knife. So it should make easy work of this. There we go. There's another one with a bit of paper cut out, because that's it transferred through to that one. I'll do it again. And by cutting the books, it does take a while, and you do one book at a time. But if you're in front of the TV one night, it's quite an easy job to do. So there we go. And now I'm going to get my Filofax hole punch, which is a KW Trio. I'm going to make sure it's on the A5 setting by making sure that the sliders are at the biggest size and making sure that the adjustable ruler is at the A5 setting. And I've just pulled it out. Whoops, there we go. There we are, and I'm going to punch a hole in it. There we go. And there's some notebook paper that is ready to go inside your Filofax. And I'm going to do the rest of the booklet, and I will show you at the end with some magical video editing what it looks like at the end. I've never done any video editing before, so wish me luck, but I will see you at the other side. Bye. Okay, so I've cut all of the pages out of the notebook, and as you can see, it's kind of messy. This isn't a foolproof way of doing it. I'm sure there are people who are better at it than me, and I've only done this about 3 times before. So I haven't found a way of doing it without having very messy edges. There's some with the glue still stuck to it and the paper from the spine. There's somewhere I've accidentally cut into the paper because my craft knife has slipped, and that's just what's going to happen if you're not a professional, and I'm certainly not a professional. So the next trick is to trim the paper so that you can get rid of all of the messy edges. So for this you need a craft knife and a ruler and a craft mat. So I'm going to pick a few of the pages. I think I've got 4 here, 5 actually. So when you trim them, if you do it at different if you cut the edge off, say if you cut 1mm off these and 2mm off that one and 3mm off another one because it's really damaged, you're going to end up with the edges not meeting because you're going to have some that are shorter than others. So I'm going to try to keep them as uniform as possible, and I'm going to make them all meet this way before cutting them by tapping them against the cutting mat. They're all pretty uniform there. So every time I grab, say, 5 that I'm going to cut through, I will do that. They won't all be absolutely perfect, but they're as good as I'm going to get. I don't have a guillotine. I used to have one, but it was rubbish. So now I just use a ruler and a craft knife. So I'll show you how I do it, and then I will come back to you when I am ready to punch. So I'm lining it up as close to the edge as possible so I don't have to trim off too much. And then I'm holding it down with my fingers, pressing firmly, and I'm just dragging it across next to the ruler. It will require a few cuts to get through all of the paper. Now I'm not doing it on the ideal surface because I'm doing it on my bed, so it's easier to do it on a table or a tray or something that's quite hard. When I finish making this part of the video, I'm going to go over to my table to do it. So as you can see, I've trimmed off quite a bit. I've still got some, so I'm just going to keep trimming until I can see it's all gone. And then I think that's pretty much done. There's some messy bits in the middle. I can see that it's not perfect, but I think once it's behind the rings, because this is the edge where the rings are going to go, you won't really see the messiness too much anyway. Okay, let's have a look. Oh, that looks pretty good. So there you go. I think that looks alright. So there we go. And now I've just got to do that for a few more, well, a couple more 100 pages, but once it's done, and then actually I'll show you how to punch it now. Again, my KW trio, and making sure all the paper is uniform, meeting together at the edge. This is the edge that isn't under the rings, and then sliding it under, making sure all the pages are tucked under, and punching it. There we go. And that is ready to put into my Filofax. So I've got some lovely Filofax paper. And I will show you what it looks like in my Filofax in the blog post, and with some of the other paper that I've already trimmed from a different notebook. And so that is how you dissect a notebook to put into your Filofax, and now I'm going to do that for the rest of them.